Welcome back. I'm Dennis Neal in for Steve Malzberg. We've been talking about the limits of government power, whether there even are any limits in this day of expanding government everywhere. And if that's true, then why is it the government sometimes seems so impotent? I mean, why can't we go rescue those girls in Nigeria, for example? And we were talking to Brett Butowski of The Hill, who sees the VA scandal. Here we have all this government power, yet they can't manage to make that work right as a bipartisan affair. And now we're going to talk to another observer in another sector. We've got John Fund. He's the Newsmax contributor and the national affairs columnist for National Review Online. Thanks for being with us, John. You had a rip-roaring column today, just kind of about, you get the feeling that climate change fearmongers, the Greenie movement, is getting increasingly shrill in some ways, and you had an awful lot to say about it. So why don't you tell us the basic outline of your argument?
Well, the more that we have evidence that global warming is less of a problem than we were told, and that it's not worth turning our economy upside down and losing jobs over it, because frankly there are other things that we can do that make more sense than drastic cap and trade provisions for carbon emissions. The more that we learn this, the more the media is saying, well, no, you're all wrong. In fact, we are even more danger than ever. In fact, we've changed the term global warming to climate change, so it explains everything. Earthquakes, cold weather, warm weather, temperature swings, everything. In other words, it's become a catch-all to scare us, and they continue to put stories on the air even though the ratings, as CNN admitted, are in the toilet.
Yeah, why do you figure the media has so firmly sided with the global warming thing? I mean, is it because, oh, gee, they're all liberals and they want to support President Obama? Is it because, hey, it's just good copy and fear sells magazines?
Well, fear may be part of that. Everybody pays more attention to a bad story than a good story in terms of news. However, I think there are two things. One is they can't admit they were wrong. They've been wrong for 20 years on this, 25 years. And secondly, it's become a secular religion for them. You know, if you don't believe in God, Steve, you'll believe in almost anything. And whether it's Gaia, the earth, goddess, or something else, people are going to believe in something. And facts and logic do not enter into that equation, because faith is faith.
Faith is faith. In fact, you point out in your column that while the media continue to, and our president and our Secretary of State continue to push on this crisis, that a surprising portion of America actually doesn't believe it's an imminent crisis at all. How do you square with that? Why is it that the public doesn't get it, but the media keeps pounding it?
Well, if you look at the Pew Research Survey poll from last year, they asked people, here are 24 issues. Which do you think should be a top priority for Congress and the president? Global warming, climate change came in last. People recognize that even if the earth is warming, it's happening at a much slower rate than we were told. By the way, when was the last time in the mainstream media you learned that we haven't had an average increase in daily temperatures globally for 15 years?
Right.
If this is global warming, we've had a 15-year pause and it's still going on.
Yes.
Secondly, we are constantly told 97% of scientists agree that global warming is occurring and that it's dangerous. Well, the Wall Street Journal today had an excellent piece.
Just devastating.
Absolutely. When I highly recommend you call Joe Bass to the Harlan Institute and put him on air, or Roy Spencer, his co-author. And it basically proved that, yeah, there may be a lot of scientists who think the Earth is warming or has a tendency to warm. That doesn't mean they want to take drastic action and sign on to the green agenda of destroying jobs and limiting economic growth, because what a lot of the green agenda is all about is finding some way to slow down our economy, because frankly, they're anti-progress, they're anti-carbon emissions, they're anti-fossil fuels, they're anti-Western civilization as we know it.
Yes, they sure are. Well, a couple of things that piece in the op-ed WSJ pointed out today was that we keep in the media repeating 97% of scientists. President Obama repeated that. Secretary of State Kerry repeated that. But in one case, it was because a student and her teacher went out and interviewed 3,100 scientists of all stripes. Of that set, 76 were climate scientists. And then of that 76, 97% of those said, yeah, I think there's warming, and yeah, I think man is contributing to it, which doesn't say that it's a crisis. So when that 97% figure is cited, it means 76 researchers out of 3,100. And there's another study that the piece traces, and it says that that it's actually 0.3% of papers actually even bother to state a view strongly one way or another, even though we keep saying 97%. Now you had, and here's the other thing, I wondered, John, at what point did we go from simply having an honest scientific debate to instead belittling the opposition, calling anyone who would raise doubts about climate change a denier, as if they're a Jewish-hating person denying the Holocaust? And you have a quote from a scientist who basically joined the other side of the debate. And we've actually got a pull quote here where the guy comes out and he says, I have been put under such enormous group pressure in recent days from all over the world that has become virtually unbearable to me. This is a shocking glance at just how much pressure there is even inside the scientific community, John.
And he compared the treatment that he'd gotten just by joining a group that was skeptical of global warming hysteria as comparable to McCarthyism. Look, you can't have an honest debate and say 97% of scientists say one thing when A, you're cooking the books, and B, you're basically destroying the reputations and lives of people who dare to dissent from you. 97% of the people who are willing to speak up is not 97% of all scientists. I really believe that this changed when they suddenly discovered the Earth was no longer warming on the average globally. And as a result, they became increasingly hysterical. And what that led to was this: we must stamp out all debate. Look at Bjorn Lomborg. Bjorn Lomborg is a liberal. He is an environmentalist. He's in Denmark. He's a statistician. He recognizes there's global warming. He recognizes that there's stuff that needs to be done. And he said, for a fraction of the cost of what we are being proposed in terms of ending carbon emissions, we could paint all the roofs in major cities in northern climates white. And that would save an enormous amount of carbon emissions.
Yes,
that would lower the temperature.
Right. Now that the 97% claim has been utterly debunked, now that we know that it was based on innumeracy, it was based on wrong calculations, the big question to me is, will the climate change movement, will President Obama stop citing the 97% figure?
No.
What's your bet?
No, of course not, because I don't think you're going to see CNN and all of these other networks that love to talk about global warming talk about the hoax of the 97%. They're going to keep talking about this until, frankly, no one is watching. Now, Jeff Zucker, the president of CNN, is an honest man. He said last week at a major journalist dinner in New York, he said, look, I know these things don't get any ratings. I know no one is watching. We're going to have to find new ways to get these stories on the air so people will finally watch it. So that's not reporting the news. That is driving an agenda. And I think I want to credit Jeff Zucker for being an honest liberal, because he's admitted he's not about reporting. He's about shoving things down people's throats.
Yeah, although increasingly all media, all internet, all online is about the same thing. What I lament, John, is that somewhere along the way, liberals turned out to be every bit as intolerant as conservatives. When I was in college and started out in college as a liberal, you know that old saying, if you're a conservative at age 20, you've got no heart, and if you're a liberal at age 40, you got no brain. Well, I started out as a liberal, but the cool thing about liberals is they always seem so tolerant. Live and let live. Hey, man, whatever you need to do. But now, man, if you're against gay marriage, boom, you are a racist and you are a gay hater. You're not simply a person who's against gay marriage.
You know, Steve, it's fascinating.
Dennis.
I'm sorry, Dennis.
Yeah, cool.
Dennis, you can afford to be tolerant. You can afford to be tolerant if you are so ingrained in your belief, you can't imagine anyone would disagree with you. That's an easy tolerance. It's when you know that there's an opposition and you actually have to feel that you have to confront them, that's when you become intolerant, because if you don't have the facts, Dennis, you say, well, baloney, rejecting the grinder. You don't want to debate, you just want to hurl names at them.
Yeah, when you don't have the facts, you can go ahead and err on the side of passion and demagoguery and just kind of marginalize your opponents. And it seems to be the outrage brigade online, the megaphone granted to tiny people that you'd never bother interviewing on the air that nonetheless we're now quoting in Twitter. It basically has made things more polarized. It's made things more separated.
A pleasure. Thanks very much. And you can read my piece at nationalreview.com.
Great job, John Fund. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it very much. Well pointed out stuff. All right, we're going to take a break, and we shall be back. More to come on the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Dennis Neal.